Hello, and welcome to another session of Life on Par. So we welcome here this podcast with career and professional development advice as we bring you interesting guests in unique career fields you may not have considered. I'm excited about today's guest. We have, as you know, March was just Women's History Month, so it brings me great joy to highlight this exceptional woman. I met her about 24 years ago when I first moved to Charlotte and I needed a primary care physician. She is no longer my PCP. However, I have dubbed her my forever doctor, and she accepts her role as me being her forever patient. We will hear about her journey to become a doctor, what type of doctor she is, her why, and much, much more. As we normally do, I have a giveaway. But you have to listen to what Dr. Hundley shares, and if you are the first to correctly answer the trivia question, you will win a prize. Before we begin, I want to take the time to remind you to like and follow us on all of our social media platforms. We have TikTok, we have IG, we have LinkedIn, and we have Facebook. That's also where you will go to answer your trivia question. Okay, are we ready? Well, let's meet the lovely Dr. Jeanea Hundley. As the youngest of 10 children, being reared in inner city Buffalo, New York, her parents pushed her and her siblings and encouraged each of them to get an education. Her love for science, and particularly medicine, came about at a very early age. Her mom worked for a cytologist, and Dr. Hundley would sit and look at her mom's slides on the microscope when she was as young as 4 years old. The love for learning continued, and she majored in biology and graduated from Canisius College in Buffalo, New York in 1991. She then went on to get her medical degree from Jacobs School of Medicine, formerly known as State University of New York School of Biomedical Sciences in Buffalo, and that was in 1995. While in her clinical years in medical school, she loved procedures and did not like being on call. She liked the fast pace and therefore chose to do a 3-year residency at emergency medicine at SUNY at Buffalo Consortium of Hospitals and graduated in 1998. Having both a primary care practice and working in the emergency department prepared Dr. Hundley for her non-clinical practice. Since 2017, she has been working for Elevance Health as a New York State medical director. She is helping promote the health of humanity with her concentration being focused in the state of New York. Dr. Jeanea Hundley is an example of despite your humble beginnings, if you work hard and sacrifice, you can be a success. So welcome, Dr. Hundley.
Thank you.
And I'm going to call you that all throughout this interview because I still think of you as my doctor, as I said. And tell us about yourself. You are a doctor, a very good doctor.
Thank you.
I was very, very disappointed and upset when you left. And of course, you gave me my next 2 doctors. So I still go to you for everything that a doctor is needed for. And I am so thankful that you take all my calls, all my text messages, all my instant messages. I'm very thankful. But tell us about yourself.
Well, like I said to you, I'm the youngest of 10 children, and I'm from Buffalo, New York. I grew up in the inner city. I decided to become a doctor at a young age. There were 3 things that pushed me into being in medicine. The first, like I said, my mother worked for a cytologist, and I always enjoyed looking at slides and trying to figure out how did these things work. So that was when I was like 4 or 6 years old. I could barely get, the woman would actually sit me on her lap to look at them.
Wow.
And then, like I said, being the youngest of 10 children, there's quite an age gap. And my older brothers are 20 plus years older than myself. And both of them, we have an issue that runs in our kidneys in our family. And so my second oldest brother had to go on dialysis back in the early 80s. And my sister is a nurse and my other sister is a dialysis tech. So my mother and father were like, well, even though he's married, we're going to dialyze him at home because he had a practice. He was a psychologist and that was what we did. We take care of one another. So I didn't understand what was going on there. And then next, a family friend said, well, when I was in college, why are you majoring in biology? And I said, well, I'm not sure what I want to do. I knew, but I just didn't verbalize it. And he made the comment, well, you'll make a good nurse. And I thought to myself, I'll show you. I'm going to become a physician, and
right.
you will know about me someday.
Okay.
So those are the things that really pushed me into medicine, and just being able to be there for other people and be an advocate and explain things to people. It's a gift, and it was given to me for a purpose, and I always believe in living life for your purpose. So I worked hard through college. I prepared for my medical school admission test, the MCAT. I had to take that. And after you take that, you fill out your applications for medical school. And I got into where I wanted to go. And I started at Syracuse. And I was like, no, I'm going to go to Syracuse. And at the last minute, I held my admission to Buffalo. And I said, I'm going to stay home. And I did. And then I went ahead and I loved emergency medicine because it's so fast paced and you had to know what you're going to do. You never knew what was coming through the door. You had to be prepared. So that was what segued into emergency medicine for me, the residency. I passed my boards, which is a 2-part board, and much worse than the MCAT exam could ever have been.
Wow.
And then came to Charlotte in 1998. My husband had already been down here working for Siemens. And went ahead and did that from 1998 to 2017. As Karen said, had a primary care practice. We did a little bit of urgent care stuff as well. Again, forming relationships and being a resource for our community.
Very good. So I have 2 quick questions from that. The friend that said you'd make a good nurse, does he know that you're a doctor? You became a full-fledged doctor?
He knew it, yes.
Very good, very good.
There's nothing wrong with being a nurse.
No,
my sisters are
nothing at
nurses,
all.
but I just kind of took that as a slight because that was the first thing he said to me.
And I take that, be it that, we just finished Women's History Month, and we know that women typically aren't, measured on the same scale as men. And so for that to be the first thing that came to his head to be a nurse, and as we said, there's nothing wrong with nurse. There are male nurses. Why couldn't we just say, hey, you're going to be a doctor? So, but that's good. And then the other thing, you said MCAT. What exactly is MCAT?
It's the Medical College Admission Test, and you have to take that to get into medical school. It's an 8-part exam that you take physics, biology, chemistry, biochemistry. There's a writing portion, a math portion.
Oh my.
And you have to, each section is graded and it's an 8-hour test. And that's what you have to do along with your applications. And with medical school, it's not just taking that test. You also have to fill out your application, then they call you in for an interview. So you interview at each college that you apply, and then they make the decision about where you're going to get in or not.
So that is the start. If you cannot get past the MCAT, then medical school is just not going to be for you.
Not really, no.
Wow. So how long did it take you to prepare, and what did you do to prepare for the MCAT?
Well, you start your preparation when you decide that you want to be pre-med. So you have to take your science classes, but you also take other things. I went to Canisius, which is a Jesuit institution. So we had to take philosophy. We had to take a lot of English and writing courses, but you do that as well. And then the summer before I took my MCAT, I actually did not work, and I took an MCAT class, and I studied, and I studied.
Wow. So all together, counting your college and then your medical school, and then any other training that you had to do in order to become the type of doctor that you wanted to, what kind of, how many years are we talking did you spend?
So you go to school and you get your undergraduate degree, and that's usually 4 years at a university or college. Then medical school is 4 years, and then residency, depending on the type of doctor. So emergency medicine is 3 years. If you do pediatrics, that's 3 years. If you do general surgery, that could be 4 to 5 years. If you do neurosurgery, that's 7 years.
Oh, wow.
So it just depends on the type of doctor that you want to be. Is how many years you're going to invest into that.
Gotcha.
So for me, it was 11 years.
And that lets me know, it gives me a little insight into why doctors are expensive, because there's a lot of preparation that goes into it, a lot of education. And so it's well worth it. It's well worth it. So how about we talk about some of the challenges that you faced in becoming a doctor? So it could be, I don't know, school, you had to work while going to school, or even after you became a doctor. What are some of the major challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome them?
Well, I think for me, my major challenge was I made up my mind when I was going to do it. I was committed. So I did not, I was blessed. I did not have to work. My parents were the type that if this is what you're going to do, my family, they supported me in doing that.
Awesome.
But once you become a physician, and especially being a woman, that was another driver for me in choosing emergency medicine, because I didn't like being on call. And if I was home with my family or with my spouse, I didn't want to have to get up and leave. So with emergency medicine, you work your shifts. And so then my challenge was, when would you have children? And what will you do when you have children to be involved in their lives? So that was one thing. And the other thing is, when you work in emergency medicine, you do trauma. And that's a really male-dominated profession. And one big challenge was to make sure that they understood that you were part of that trauma team and that you wanted your time in the OR. You wanted your time with the sick calls and things like that. And you just really, you have to dig deep and not care if you appear to be offending someone, because you're doing it because you need to get that training, because you need to be out there.
Right. So that's interesting. And the fact that you wanted to be in the emergency room situation, you must have experienced everything from, I don't know, a broken finger to somebody fell off of their roof doing home improvement. What would be, in your viewpoint, the scariest emergency situation that you were involved in? And how did you get yourself prepared to handle it? Because it could have been something that you weren't used to seeing, and you had to pull everything, all together to treat this patient with this emergency situation.
Well, the one thing you do is, like I said, when you were training, when you're going through your rotations and residency, you take your time and you get your time in the OR. You do what you need to do. But I would say the scariest things for me still, no matter, after doing it for 22 years, I did not like children or babies being involved in traumas or something bad happening to them, because that's something you really, emotionally, you can't prepare yourself for. You run things through your head and you run scenarios. And I would say that running scenarios in your head and being there present and realizing that you pull back on your training will always make you prepare, and you talk to yourself and you say, hey, I'm standing at the top of the bed because I got the training and I can do this.
Right. You can do it. That's very, very good. So let's talk about the landscape of the medical field in general. Let's talk about how many women versus how many men, where the trend is going. Are there any advances coming to play? I know AI is a really big thing. Will AI play any part in the medical field?
I believe AI will. We actually at Elevance do use some of it for our charting. But I will always say with AI, and perhaps it's because of my age, it will never replace our training in our brains. Because at the end of the day, yes, you can go on, Chat GPT and ask, my blood pressure is X, but there's a whole landscape of a diagnosis that you need to think about. And that's something that you learn through training and going to school. In terms of women, I was reading that there's 20% increase of women that are applying to medical school. But in emergency medicine, we're still less than 40% of the landscape of emergency physicians. You still look at women, 20% difference in earning and things of that sort. So we're getting there, but we still got a long ways to go.
Okay. And why do you think that there are less women in emergency medicine than men?
Because it's not a primary care specialty. And I spent, over those 3 years, I spent just as much time with trauma surgeons as I did with doing orthopedics. Those are all male-driven specialties, and you have to be very comfortable working with men.
Gotcha.
And it's hard. I mean, we work nights, holidays, and weekends. Think about your emergency department never closes.
Correct.
And if you want a family, it's really hard to make that, sacrifice.
And you think about some of the emergencies that happen. I think I read somewhere, I don't know if it's still true, that most accidents occur in your own home.
Right.
And it could be, you're on vacation, it's a holiday during the summer where you're kind of doing these do-it-yourself projects. You suddenly think you're Superman, and
that's right.
That's what happens. So that's interesting. So you bring up the point that some of the fields are male dominated, and it's really hard for women. Women make still less salary. I think that's across the board in most industries, right? So are there any type of organizations or groups that support women, that, help the women to get that out and try to level the playing field?
There are some. I mean, AMA has some different ones, and there's the American, I'm blanking on the one name, that actually goes in. And then the other thing is you mentor. You should, the thing is you connect with women, and I'm the type of woman that I will tell you certain things and I will direct you, and we have to kind of coalesce and help one another.
Yeah, we do. We do. So I think about the time when I was your patient. I know that I was difficult because, and I'm going to be transparent.
It's not.
I had a cholesterol problem, and I remember that specifically. And you wanted me to take a certain medication, and I was kind of resistant. I didn't want to take it because of the list of don'ts with the medication. I didn't love that list. I didn't love that list at all. So you actually, and I love that about you, you gave me some other options, but then you also said, if this and this does not work, you're going to take this medication. And I felt it in my spirit. And then I think about the relationship that we had. We developed a friendship, and I just can't imagine you having that type of relationship with all of your patients. Because you'd never really get work done. I mean, I'm going to be truthful. It felt like I was just coming to visit my girlfriend when I had doctor's appointments, because we would sit down and I would really share with you what's going on with me. So you had a real sense of the type of person I was, what I was doing, and everything about me, so that you were able to make a complete diagnosis. You were able to recommend medication and procedures for me that were specially tailored. So how do you get that type of, and I know that you were very thorough, without having that type of relationship with all of your patients, how are you sure to make that same diagnosis, holistic diagnosis with all of your patients? Because honestly, most doctor's appointments are short, so you don't really get to know everything. And we don't typically let the doctor know everything. We're not typically honest, right? Do you smoke? No. Or yes, I smoke. How much? 1 cigarette a day. Meanwhile, it's two packs. So you never really get the full picture, right, from your patients. So how do you overcome that as a doctor?
Well, what I do, and even in the emergency department, when I'm with you, I'm listening, and I try to be 100% engaged. So in the ER, of course, not everyone that comes there is having the heart attack or the stroke or has been shot. Those are the easy ones, actually. It's the person that comes in with the vague complaint. So you sit down. That's one of the first things I've always done. I sit down when I talk to my patients, and I listen, and I watch. Because and I let them know that they're important for me. Even if they're in the ER and they're just there for a sore throat, you learn a lot about people and you can help them. And again, that's pulling into my gift. And I'm interested. I chose this field because I wanted to help people. And I just try to make the most of the amount of time that I'm with them.
Okay. And I could definitely see that, because I felt the connection. I think we realized early on that we were both from New York, and I was a transplant here, seeing you. I don't know how I ended up selecting you as my primary care physician, but I'm happy that I did. And I could definitely attest to you being warm and really listening. I felt heard when I sat down, and this was before we developed a relationship. I felt heard when I came to see you as a doctor. Okay, well, let's kind of switch gears a little bit. How or what would you share? As you know, our audience is 13 to 18-year-olds. What can you share with our audience to let them know that this field is something that they too can do? Yes, it's hard. You've got the medical school, you've got all the schooling, you've got all the training. What can you share with them that was actually fun about all of that, so that they would know that this is something that they can do, and not be afraid of the education and the training that will go into it?
Well, the first thing I would tell anyone is, if you really want to do it, don't let fear get in the way of it, because it's your calling. And when I was in the hospital, I felt the energy. My sophomore year of college, I volunteered and I ended up in the emergency department. And I didn't mind going to work every day. So I never looked back to figure out I never got afraid of what was going to be involved. And I would tell you, dig deep. If you feel energy when you're doing something, that's your calling. And it's worth it. And it's about delayed gratification. The fact that I put in the time when I was younger meant that when it was time for me to go to medical school, I knew I was going to get in somewhere. And I knew when I interviewed for residency, I worked hard in medical school, I'm going to get in somewhere as well. You can do this. You just have to dig deep and just put your head down and keep it going, because it's going to be all right and you're going to do it.
Good. Now, what do we say to the person that hates the sight of blood, but feels in their spirit that they want to be a doctor?
Well, that would be challenging. I guess you could be a psychiatrist, but you still have to. But medical school is about clinical, and you're still going to have to spend your rotations doing surgery, internal medicine. You're going to do pediatrics. I would see if I really was afraid of blood, and then just try it out. But you would know before that. Medical school, before you get to medical school, the amount of training that it takes to get there, the testing, the scores that you need, the training as an undergrad, you'll know that before. I don't think there's anybody that hates the sight of blood as a physician. And if you are, maybe that's ain't for you. But maybe you could do psychiatry.
Okay. And so you're in the doctor's office. You're dealing with, blood, you're dealing with medicine, some liquid, everything stains. And what's the derivation of the white coat? Why isn't your coat black so it doesn't show all the stains?
Because
Explain
physicians seldom get dirty. My nurse is checking the vitals most of the time. The phlebotomist in the lab is drawing the labs, and the lab tech is doing the lab work. I get dirty in the ER most of the time because we're hands-on. But in the office, think about it. You and I were sitting talking, and then I would do an exam.
That's
I don't get dirty.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
don't get dirty.
Okay.
So medicine is a career that you don't necessarily have to get dirty.
I like that. Okay. What is the worst part of your job?
The worst part is telling someone's family that they've died. I would say that was it. Losing patients is the worst part of your job, or knowing that you're given that, diagnosis that there's no cure for.
Right.
That's the worst part.
And how do you handle that? What do you draw on in order to find the strength to deliver that message?
Oh, I've delivered some terrible messages. I just sit there. I sit down. I've always sat down when I'm talking to a family, and I just tell them what's happening and what's going on, and just be a person for a little while, but also be a professional. And then if you're going to cry, you do it outside that room. You get yourself together, because in the ER, there's that next patient that's coming. But you just, years of training and just talking to yourself through it, and giving yourself grace that if you really do have a case that's touching your heart, that it's going to be okay. You can give that, but I don't cry with them.
Right. Okay. So that is, that's heavy.
Very heavy.
And you can't sustain that day in, day out, week in, What do you do to relax? What fun do you have?
Oh, I like to read.
Okay.
I like to cook. I like to decorate and do things around my home. I like to garden. Oh. And that's the one thing about it. If you're going to work this hard, you need to find an outlet, something you like to do.
That is it. So what's in your garden? Talk to me about your garden.
Oh, well, the deer and I fight, but But I do a lot of annuals. I do a lot of, I like the Japanese maples. I like to put things out. I like to put in the tulips and the crocuses and things like that.
So if I were to come to your house in your den or your living room, will we have fresh flowers from your garden?
No.
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 Okay. All right. And then, so you probably have some bonds. You spend that much time in the ER or in your medical offices, and you can develop some friendships with the doctors. Do you guys get together and talk about the day you've had and go out and vacation? Talk to me about how do you unwind with your coworkers? Because we do happy hour. Do doctors do happy hours?
No, I did not tend to do happy hours. But what you do is when you're on shift, or even now, we talk to each other during the day about difficult cases, and we tell each other that it's going to be okay, and we let one another know that, okay, if you're going through this, I've been through it, or I'm going to help you with it. And to unwind, sometimes people do get together on after shift or whatever. I tended not to do that, but I have some good friends, and if I had a different court case or something bad happened, I'd call them mid shift, like, let me just pull it on you right now.
Cool. That's really good. So what else do you want to share about either your journey, what you do now, as opposed to having your primary care office, which I really want you to return to? I'm saying that with my whole heart.
Well, what I do now is different. Working in the insurance industry, working on healthcare policy and those type of things. It's very interesting. And my years in the ER prepared me for that. But emergency medicine and even primary care, to me, personally, working those shifts, that's for younger people.
Okay.
As I say, delayed gratification, put your years in while you're younger, so that now I work from my home.
Awesome.
My office is in New York. I have not been to it because of Zoom and things of that sort. But the years in the ER taught me about compassion when I'm dealing with a difficult case now. But, realizing every patient is an individual and helping that person. But again, being in the ER is not sustainable to me for 40 years or 30 years. And after putting in 25 years, that was when I made the change.
Okay. So you're at home, you work from home, and it's for the insurance agency. So are you the person that would help them set the rates for different things, or deny claims, approve claims?
I work as a medical director. I look at hospital cases, cases for different type of medications and procedures. And yes, I do sit on committees to approve, deny, to restructure our healthcare policies and those type of things. But no, I don't renegotiate rates. I'm not in sales or anything like that.
Okay, so what's the exciting part about that? And it's good to know that the insurance companies actually have doctors that are making, because as the consumer on this side, I always feel like, well, the insurance company doesn't understand. I can't understand why they're not covering this, and I always feel like they're not doctors and they're making the decision. So it's good to hear and understand. And this is yet something else that you could do as a doctor.
Yes.
So it's a lot of different fields and jobs that you can go into. So talk to me about sitting there and making these types of decisions. What's exciting for you besides being able to be home and do your own hours and things of that nature? What's the big bright light of taking on the role that you do now? Well,
the big bright light for me has been when we get difficult cases, the patient that has terminal illnesses, and you're sitting there and you're looking and you realize they don't quite meet for this, but you say, I can go outside and I can, consult and send it off to a doctor that doesn't work for the insurance department.
Gotcha.
And then we can try to get those drugs approved. And then we also have case management. So you can often help families with special needs children. So when I sit down and I look at a case, I do the same thing as I did when I was taking care of you. I look at the whole thing. I have it all
Gotcha.
right there. And so by the time it reaches our level, they've tried to help you. And we're not always the bad guy. Yeah. And I feel good about that. When I've, got that person their meds, when I have, got them their treatment or got them into a skilled nursing facility, those type of things. And that's the stuff that they pull us in to do.
Okay. Well, that's good. It's good to know that there is, like I personally know someone that does that and know that the care is there and it's not just doing it because the insurance company needs to save money.
Right.
So that's very good.
We're actually told not to look at the price of a claim. It's
Wonderful.
blinded, actually. I don't know what things cost. I just get the clinical.
Okay. Well, that's
And
good.
they demand that we stay board certified. So when you become a physician and you become board certified, every 10 years, I have to take my board exams again, and I still do my boards.
Wow.
And we have to keep our jobs.
Well, that's wonderful. That's good. So let's talk about money. We talked about how long it takes to become a doctor. We talked about the different areas that you can go into within the medical field. Let's talk about salary range because, that's important.
Right.
Everyone wants to make a lot of money. And I think that we have a overrated or overinflated idea of what doctors make because we always see you driving around in big fancy cars or the joke is that you're out playing golf, which we'll get into a little bit later. So let's talk about salary ranges.
Okay. So I can easily talk about emergency medicine because that's what my was. So when you come out, so with emergency medicine, you're either employed by the hospital, which those contracts are kind of going away. When I came to Charlotte, I worked for what is now Atrium, but it was Carolina's Medical Center. So I was one of their employees. But you're going to start anywhere from nowadays about $220 a year, and the average emergency physician is making about $290, and some of my friends will make in the fours.
Okay.
It just depends how much you want to work. Full time in emergency department is usually 12 shifts a month, and so that's what fit into my life. But that's another reason why you can tolerate studying that long because you'll be able to make a good living and you can retire younger.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, but
That's
the average
important.
ER doc is going to make about $280 to $290 a year.
Okay, so that I think that would be important for our audience because sometimes you're looking at a field and you really want to have a realistic viewpoint of how much you can make. Okay, so is there anything else about your journey, your life as a doctor, or the industry as a whole that we didn't touch on that you think it's important that we should know?
Well, I think the one big thing right now is we need to look at the change of healthcare and the fact that we can't allow it to be thought of as a privilege. Healthcare is a right, and you're taking care of people, and you need to choose it because it is your calling. You don't worry about necessarily what you're going to make. Money will follow you when you do what you love.
That's a good point.
But people are people. We are not cars. And you need to have a drive and do what you need to do, but only do it if it's your calling.
I like that. Well, that's a good note to kind of wrap up and segue over to our next. So as you know, Life on Par fits under the umbrella of the RLE Go For It Foundation. And what we do first and foremost is golf. How's your golf game?
I don't golf. Well, if you count Top Golf, I golf.
We can count that.
Okay.
We can count that.
Okay.
So you're not one of those doctors that, leave work at 2:00 in the afternoon to go hit a few balls?
No.
Or to get up early in the morning to hit a few balls before work?
No.
So would you still be willing to go out with us on the green and practice?
Of course.
Okay, we have a golf pro and we're gonna meet, wrap up here, and then we'll meet outside and we'll see what your golf skills are. Maybe that can be your next thing that you pick up and do.
Perhaps.
Okay.
Retirement is on the horizon.
How long before we retire?
Probably at least 5 years.
Wow,
I'm just kidding.
That'll go quick though. That 5 years is fast. So that's your 5-year plan.
That would be my 5-year plan. But we know, was it man plans and God laughs?
Yes. So that sounds good. That sounds good. Well, I'd like to thank you for sharing with us today. I personally like to thank you because I haven't seen you in a while. So it is a pleasure to sit down and really talk to you and find out, how you got into the medical field and a little more about you. And thank you for sharing with our audience today. And let's transition and meet on outside on the greens. All right. Thank you. Okay, so here we are out here on our green for our second part of the segment, and we have the lovely Dr. Hundley here, and we're going to practice some golf. So Jeanea,
Yes.
you said you didn't play golf, you know nothing about golf, but you're willing to let's have a conversation about it?
Yes.
We got you holding a club.
Yes.
Okay, so we have our golf pro, Miss Raina Pozel. And we're gonna just casually talk about golf. You get to ask any question your heart is burning about to our golf pro here.
Okay. So
All right.
I always see them talking about different types of clubs.
Yes.
The wood, the irons. What are the difference?
So when we think about the difference in the clubs, the first thing that I always think of is the face of the club. When we think about the face of the club, when you look at an iron or if you look at a wedge, it's that nice flat face.
Okay.
But if you look closely at a wedge, you'll notice that that angle of the face starts to go a little bit more back. And as we move higher up in degree in club, meaning when we get higher in number, that face starts to slowly get a little bit more closed and a little bit more square.
Okay.
So when we go from, say, a gap wedge like I have in my hand, that face is pretty flat. I can flatten that face pretty easily. If we were to take your 8-iron here, we'll notice that when we set that face down, it doesn't flatten as easily. It's not as open. So you look at the different angles of the face, and that really determines on what kind of club you're hitting and what kind of shot you're going to get out. So the lower the iron, the further it goes. So my 6-iron goes further than my 8-iron, which is kind of backwards in the seams, but everything in this sport's a little bit backwards, honestly. When we start working up to our woods and our drivers, you'll notice that the surface face is a lot bigger. We have a lot more space to work with. You look at an iron or a wedge and you've got this tiny little face to work with. You look at a driver, it's almost like double. And as you move up in club, you notice the face gets larger and larger and larger. So there's more surface space to work with. There's more shots you can play out with that club.
You ready?
Yes.
Next question. What we got?
So, and with golf though, like you said, everything's different with golf. So the more hits it takes to get into a hole, the worse you're playing.
Yes.
Correct?
Going backwards.
I know about that.
This sport is all about what the lowest score is, not the highest score. So when you're working on a golf course, my mindset is that if my par is 4, I have 4 shots to get to the hole. So it's my intention to get there in 3 shots or in 2 shots, however many shots I can get there to get under 4 or at least at 4. When we start working over 4, we've got bogeys, double bogeys, triple bogeys, numbers we don't want to talk about that get up there, high up there. But that's kind of funny thing about golf, what I love. That's what's unique about it, is that backwards working, kind of working on what the lowest score is, not always the highest score.
Gotcha. And you said a bogey.
Bogey, so 1 over par, 2 over par is a double bogey, triple bogey is 3 over par, and then we have a double, which is double par.
And when you go out and play, it's usually 18 holes. Usually, is that a full course or?
I think it depends on what the golfer wants to experience. I welcome everyone to play 18 holes. If you feel comfortable, confident, and strong enough to get through 18, that's anywhere from 4.5 to 6 hours of your time. That's a lot of time to put in. That's a lot of swings to put in. So we always recommend that, if you're first starting out and you want to build your comfortability into the game, play 9 holes, play 6 holes, play 3 holes. Play what you're most comfortable with. So that way, when you're getting into it, you're finishing that round in that game feeling comfortable, confident, and sure in yourself on those holes.
I remember when I did my first 18, I was doing 9, 9, 9. Then I felt like I could do 18. I did it. It was a struggle. 9, I love. 18, if I'm playing pretty decent, I can keep on going. But yeah. What does it mean? I've heard the term, he beat the course. What does that mean?
Rule of thumb for me, mentality is very important on the golf course. I am not playing my competitors, I am playing the course. The course is my competition, the course is the person that I'm actually playing against, not the people standing next to me. When I beat a course, that tells me that I set out my score for myself and I did even better than I expected. I played that course so well that I beat the course. So when you beat the course, that's basically you hitting all of your goals and markers that you set for yourself when you first started your round.
So it has nothing to do with what that course, how many, what par is. It has nothing to do with that.
It means that you played your best round and you beat the course to your highest ability.
Also, I always beat the course then.
Yes.
There you go. It's about setting and managing
course.
our expectations.
Yes.
There you go. There you go.
Individually, I gotcha. Do you prefer to play on grass or turf? Does it matter?
I think it really matters. I always prefer to play on grass. All of my students are grass trained. The reason being is that I feel like turf gives you a false lie. So it elevates you unnaturally. So when you move to grass and you're wondering, well, why am I not connecting the same way? Why am I not getting down the same way? You don't have that same level of false elevation that you do when you have turf. You notice that you're not fully connected to the ground. So when you are flat to the ground and when you are working on that surface tension and staying low to the ground, it's a little bit harder because you're used to naturally coming up. So whenever I have students who are constantly missing over top of the ball or coming out really low, I always ask them, do you practice on grass or do you practice on turf? Because it's a real difference. So I always prefer and preach grass. Grass is what we need.
So I noticed, so I'm just going to be transparent here. Raina is my golf coach here. But I noticed that when we practice, well, you know, I would fix one thing and then my swing is still not doing what I want. Something else has completely fallen and you're always correcting me. Why is that?
20 plus years in the game and I'm still learning, I'm still growing, I'm still managing myself through the game. 1% is the best that we improve through every practice. We fix one thing, the next thing falls out. But it's important to remember that you are still fixing something. You have to give yourself grace to make those body adjustments and let it sink in a little bit. You have to learn to set in that muscle memory and give yourself time to really get into the game and get into those new corrections that you're making.
Gotcha. So grace. We're going to have grace.
We're going to have grace.
Out, right? Yay.
Yes, we'll have some
Yay.
grace.
Anything else that you're burning to know about golf?
I think
That's it. Well, we thank you for humoring us and coming out here. I'm going to try and get you out there one day, though. I really am.
Okay, all right.
But thank you so much
No
for the
problem.
session. Raina, any last minute tidbits or tips that you want to give?
Give your guys some grace, come out to the golf course, have fun, be confident, and just enjoy yourself. That's all that really matters.
Well, thank you. And there we have it, the wrap up of another Life on Par session. Dr. Jeanea Hundley, we'd like to thank you for sharing your time, your experience, and your field with us today.
No problem.
And Raina, we'd like to thank you as well.
Awesome, yes.
We're out. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye.